Hi friends, this is Dr. Praful Dikshit. I'm here again after, of course, a very long time. It's been almost over a year. I promised to be in touch more frequently, but then something kept me busy for last 1 year. I'm sorry about that, but then this time I promise I'm going to be around more often and more frequently, and we'll have very good, mind-igniting discussions on statistics. And I'm sure it's going to be a very important and very significant and a very enjoyable learning journey that we set out on the uh, at the juncture. I mean the first point wherein we started with the very first video. Um, so we started with a very important topic, and that is about p-value. P-value is a very discussed topic in research circles, in academic circles, and it's very important from a research results perspective, and it is also a very controversial topic. And in the first part, or a major portion of my presentation and these instructional series, what I'm going to do is, of course, I'm going to touch upon the topic because I want the aspiring researchers as well as the existing researchers to benefit from this knowledge. But in the second half, I'm also going to appraise the importance or the significance of the concept of significance itself. So let's very briefly recap what we did in the last video, and we started out with so the concept of significance, and we discussed how significance is the importance of any process, in generic terms, right? And then we moved on to what is an effect and how it is important, and how an effect is important to a researcher, and how what a researcher wanted his or her effect to be, right? And it's that's usually consists of a bias, but then of course there are biases, and there are individual biases and there are systemic biases, which should not affect the research, but then they do. I mean, despite best efforts, they do. So, and then we went on to to asking, in plain and simple terms, as a researcher, how would you want your results to be? Whether you would want them to be significant or insignificant. So, most of the people want them to be significant because it validates their research efforts, and it also, uh, based on the assumptions they want to prove. I mean, they want whatever they want to prove to be proved right. So it's basic, simple psychology, a researcher psychology, right? Then we posed a question in general to the researcher community as to, what do you think is usually the fate of the studies with non-significant results in terms of the publication, right? So as researchers, you all have published, you keep publishing researches, but are you aware that most of the researches with non-significant results are not even considered for publication? So, however, if we see from a neutral point of view, this is not a good practice. This is not right. But again, this is kind of a bias on the part of the publishers of research, isn't it? It's a very serious problem, and some of you might have conducted meta-analysis researches, and therein it's a very important consideration as to the bias in terms of the publication of significant or insignificant results. This is well documented in literature, and this is known as publication bias. So, okay. Now, due to the researcher bias towards the significant results, there exists a publication bias, as I already discussed, and everyone wants to publish only significant results, but this is not good for researchers. So this is just one fallout of one aspect of whatever we are discussing here at now. But it is important to keep in mind that there is bias at the level of the researcher, at the institutional level, as well as in the minds of the people who review your research, and the publishers as well, because they want to publish all those researches which have some proven or significant results. But again, like we posed a question last time, do all those researches which do not have significant results, are they not important? Uh, do you think whatever is proven not to be significant, or not to be significant in terms of be supportive of certain effects in certain fields, is not important finding? I mean, uh, you know, non-existence of certain results in certain fields could also be an indicator of some important finding. It could be an important gap. It could be something that might need to be done in order to produce some important effects. So according to me, non-significant results are also significant. Okay, so now let's uh, move a bit ahead, and uh, take the take the track that we intend to pursue in this series of lectures, and let's talk about the p-value, right? But I have a habit of slightly uh, hovering around the point, just in order to make you understand, or make us understand the simple points, or the simple concepts underlying any concept that we're discussing at hand. So before we move ahead, there's another point to ponder, and that is, so what is the basic premise and the purpose of statistics? Oh, so you might be thinking I've thrown you back, in terms of understanding level of statistics, and I mean, this is very basic. This is very rudimentary. But friends, if we get the basics right, I think everything else works on its own, right? So everything falls into place if the basics are correct. So, what is the basic premise and purpose of statistics? Now, statistics in itself is a field wherein we are supposed to measure the characteristics of a representative sample, which is drawn from a population, and when measuring the characteristics of the whole population is not feasible, it becomes necessary to draw a sample, a small sample, a small part of that population, and study that. So if we are not able to study the whole population, what we do is we study a sample. Now, if we study a sample, the sample has to be, what do you think? How should the sample be, right? So let's think about it. If we are studying a population, okay, in our research, of course, we study populations of variables, populations of uh, so the population of variables, and the population of entities, the population of phenomena, the populations of people, the population of anything under the sun, anything in nature. We might, whatever we might want to measure or study about, or have a point of view about, it has to be looked at in terms of a population, because they are they are in terms of they exist in terms of certain units, and those units aggregate into a population. Now, if we are studying some phenomena, we're actually studying units of nature, units of nature in terms of different aspects or processes or concepts or ideas that we want to study about, and that give us more information about the way things work in nature, right? So uh, population, in fact, is so the population itself, in fact, is the basic premise of why we want to study statistics. But then, since in a negative sense, because uh, since we cannot study the whole population, that is why we study statistics, right? So we say that when we say that statistics is supposed to measure the characteristics of a representative sample drawn from a population, it really means that the whole population cannot be it is not feasible, really. And I mean, in most cases it is not feasible, right? So we what we do is uh, the statistical reference inference that is uh, you know the basis rooted in the possibility that results can be generalized from a sample to a population uh, is the basic premise of studying statistics, right? Okay. Now let's just discuss some examples of samples of population. I mean, let me start with a few. For example, there could be a representative sample drawn from the population of zebras in a forest, which measures the water intake of a typical zebra in a day, right? Or maybe the math scores of girls in a school, or of course boys. There could be ample examples of what could those measures be, right? And now, here again, we come. Why is it important to draw a representative sample? Is it really necessary? I mean, how does it help, and what is the harm if it is not representative? How to ensure that it's a representative sample? Now, okay, well, so talking about representation, uh, a population is good enough only to the extent only to the extent that it can be measured properly, right? You know, any population, if it's very large, for example, uh, the population of a country, of course, there are projects which measure the characteristics or the traits or the properties of the entire populations. For example, human population in a country. So we have all heard about censuses, right? So census is nothing but a research project which measures the human population and its characteristics, uh, its attributes in totality for a particular geographical area. So, of course, we'll come to how a population is defined and what a sample is exactly. Some of you are already aware of that, but that would be slightly uh, getting deviated from the topic. But however, all of you are aware what is a sample and what is a population in very, very basic terms. But what I really want to stress is on the point that why is it important to really draw a representative sample? Now, what is meant by a representative sample? So in common terms, a representative sample would be something that is very identical to the original, and the original or the source of the sample. That is, for example, if I have a box full of apples, and I want to draw a sample of 5 apples from the box, and the box contains, say, maybe 100 apples. Yeah, uh, and I want to measure a particular trait of the population of the apples in that particular box. Let's just assume that the apples in the box consist is the whole population.